Okay, so last month I made a video on the themes of grief and loss in Expedition 33, and in that I touched upon the game South of Midnight, specifically on the character of Laurent, and how having the idea that he needed to bottle up his feelings and never cry or show weakness beaten into him set him up for failure in life, and it's something that I've been thinking back to quite a bit in the time since then. Thus, I've decided I want to discuss it properly in its own video, so here we are. Today we're talking about toxic masculinity and a little bit about gender essentialism because this game is really good and made my brain go burr. So yeah, spoilers ahead for Chapter 7 of South of Midnight, you should definitely play it if you haven't. Also, if you're just here to leave a comment whining about how toxic masculinity isn't real and feminism is fascism or something without watching the video or engaging with my points, just know that I'll take it down because I don't respect you and don't care enough to pretend your opinion has enough merit to consider. Alright, let's get started. So for those who don't know, South of Midnight is the story of Hazel Flood, a young woman whose mother, Lacey, gets swept away in a hurricane, along with her house, who then discovers that she is a weaver, someone with a magical connection to the universe that allows them to perceive the invisible threads that bind all of reality together and use them to mend the traumas that people have suffered, trauma leaving very real and literal damage upon the fabric of reality. Also, magical creatures exist. It's urban fantasy in the deep south. Bayou fantasy? I don't know. Anyway, in her journey to find and save her mother, Hazel is directed by her definitely not evil old money grandmother to find Laurent in his bar in the backwoods, who she's told can help her find Hug and Molly, the creature that took her mama. But Laurent isn't just any bartender, he's also Lacey's ex, who dumped her and broke her heart, something Hazel never forgave him for. And let me just play their interaction to bring you up to speed, and I want you to pay special attention to Laurent's body language during the scene because it's very important.
We ain't open. Hey, didn't you hear what? Hazel? What are you? You've grown.
It's been a while.
Yeah. How you doing?
Do you know where I can find Hug and Molly?
Don't know what you're talking about.
Yes, you do. Bunny said.
Bunny? As in Bunny Flood, your absentee grandmother? Explains why you dress like that.
Whatever. She's just trying to help me.
Right. Because Bunny's known for giving you a helping hand.
This is different.
I saw how she treated you and Lacey.
And how did you treat Mom?
I treated Lacey well.
Until you didn't. You just up and left us one day.
This is grown folks' business. You a child. This ain't for you.
I ain't no damn child. Do you know how sad she was when you left us?
It was complicated. There was a...
Don't make excuses.
Hazel?
You didn't deserve her.
That's enough. I need you to leave.
Did you even care? What was so wrong with Mama? With us?
Nothing. Nothing. It's me. It's always me.
Laurent?
Hazel, no! I'm not safe. Get out!
That was probably a lot to take in. I'll give you a moment if you need it. I'm going to come back to this scene later, but for now what's important to note is how Laurent reacts to Hazel's accusations. He's very clearly trying and failing to control his temper before attempting to push her away as he starts to transform, and a lot of care was put into both his body language and facial expressions. He's a man barely holding himself together as someone picks at an old wound, and it doesn't take him long to explode. And by explode I mean turn into a giant mutant owl that can probably, oh I'm just spitballing here, pick up a car and drop it from 100 feet? You're probably wondering why Laurent transforms into a monster when he gets angry, and there are two explanations for that, Watsonian and Doyleist. The Watsonian explanation is that Laurent is what's known as a rougarou, a form of lycanthropic curse stemming from a truly monstrous accumulation of unaddressed trauma. And the Doyleist explanation is that this is a metaphor for how toxic masculinity can turn men into tragic monsters, ticking time bombs of repressed feelings and stunted emotional maturity that will ultimately destroy themselves if they cannot learn to process their negative emotions in a healthy manner. Yup, we're getting psychological and philosophical up in this bitch today. Aren't you lucky? So what is toxic masculinity anyway? I know it's a term that gets thrown around a lot without ever really getting defined, so let me set the record straight. Toxic masculinity is, at its core, a collection of harmful behaviors and tendencies that stem from a belief in traditional male roles taken to the extreme. It is the boiling down of what men are into an unhealthy and restrictive caricature of a human being that is impossible to live up to, and therefore will leave you miserable and forever struggling to prove your masculinity both to yourself and the people around you. And it follows 3 basic rules. 1. Toughness. Men need to be physically strong, emotionally callous, and behaviorally aggressive. 2. Anti-femininity. Men should reject traditionally feminine behaviors like showing emotion and asking for or accepting help. 3. Power. Men should work towards obtaining power and status, both social and financial, and this is how you gain the respect of others. It should be noted, by the way, that toxic masculinity is not the same as the concept of masculinity itself. This might be hard for some people to accept, but masculinity, much like femininity, is neither good nor bad. Both are inherently neutral. Both are merely the collection of attributes and traits societies have connected with either men or women. And toxic masculinity is the deification of masculine traits alongside the demonization of the feminine. And yes, this means that toxic femininity is a thing too, but I'm trying to keep my ADHD bitch ass focused for 5 minutes, so that's a topic for another time. There are a lot of problems that find their roots in toxic masculinity, such as glorifying unhealthy habits and teaching men to treat their bodies like machines and refuse to practice self-care, the stigmatization of mental illness and healthcare, and some truly rancid attitudes towards women and queer people. But as a whole, it's all connected to one core issue. It tells you you need to cut out half of your humanity to be accepted. The thing about masculinity and femininity is that they are completely arbitrary categories. All people are a mix of both traditionally masculine and feminine traits. Softness and emotional intelligence are not just a feminine thing. Anger and strength are not purely masculine. But toxic masculinity teaches men that, to be considered real men, they need to cut out or suppress the traits that could be considered feminine, and not only is that fucking impossible to do, but trying to do so will only cause suffering. And this teaching method starts very early. It's something that gets beaten into men from the moment they're old enough to understand. And to explore this, let's look back at Laurent.
I break my bones, I rend my skin, bricks turn to dust, and rage floods in.
Immediately after Laurent's transformation, you come across a lot of old logging company housing, and this is where Laurent once lived with his parents. Obviously, the factory owner was a bastard who exploited his workers. Obviously, this meant overworking and underpaying them. You know how it works. Where the tragedy truly begins is that Laurent's mother fell sick, a sickness that could have been easily survivable if they'd been able to take her to see a doctor. But his father was only paid in company scrip, which would not cover the cost of a doctor, no matter how many extra shifts he took. You actually find a letter that has the factory thanking him for his years of service while rejecting his request to swap company scrip for cash to help pay for her medical treatment, literally condemning her to an entirely avoidable death and leaving Laurent to be raised by his grieving father because it saved them a few dollars. And this, sadly, is where the teaching starts.
That man was the devil, he whipped me, he hurt me, all to make me a man. He laid the first brick, not me, told me to square up my shoulders, boys don't cry. Brick by tear-stained brick, I sew my pain inside, inside.
Laurent's daddy was an old-fashioned man. He believed it was a man's job to provide entirely for his family, and that needing comfort or help was a failure on his part. He says as much in a note of his own, and he instilled this ideology into his son, that men carry their burdens by themselves. You can't show your feelings, you can't show your weakness. You're not allowed to have those. This led to a truly awful situation wherein his father, who was also never taught how to process his feelings and only to push them down, taught his son the exact same.
On his mama's birthday, Laurent ran away, crying out like a wounded owl. Daddy always warned him not to show his pain. You got to hide it, Daddy said. Push it down and bury it. But in the heart of the woods, Laurent found himself consumed by it.
I said this in the Clair Obscur video and it bears being expanded upon here. Boys don't cry is an insidious sentiment because it teaches boys that showing their emotions is inherently wrong. And it's often the very first lesson in instilling toxic masculinity into them. You're taught that anger and violence are the only acceptably manly displays of emotion, and it sets them up for failure in life because you need to know how to experience and manage your emotions in a healthy manner, or it will damage both your health and your relationships. Teaching men that non-aggressive displays of sorrow or weakness are wrong, and that they should push these things down because it's just what men do, is destructive and dangerous. And we see this happen with Laurent. His grief and pain and anger build up inside him, and then it all bursts out of him when his father dies.
Laurent missed his mama so much he couldn't stand it. He went to fight the factory boss to tell him off, but his daddy tried to stop him. And when his daddy saw the death of Laurent's pain, that's when he got mad. The boss was always afraid of his workers. That's why he kept a gun in his office. He didn't mean for it to go off, probably. Didn't stop the bullet from punching through Daddy's skull, ending his life in a blink. With his daddy's blood dripping down his chin, Laurent couldn't hold his feelings in anymore. They burst through his skin like feathers. His anguish seemed to lift him up into the air. The terrified sawmill boss drove away as fast as his fine car would go. Laurent flew after it, carried aloft by currents of his own torment.
Managing your emotions doesn't mean never showing them. It means feeling and handling them as they come in a healthy way. Humans are emotional creatures. We need to be allowed to process and fucking feel our feelings, or else they will turn into a poison inside. And this is why the Rougarou is such a good metaphor for all of this. Your anger may not literally transform you into a monster, but if you spend your life refusing to properly address your emotions, then you will have become a time bomb. Sooner or later, they will come out, and if they come out on their own, it will be in a form you do not control. That is what the Rougarou is. It is that one small thing that causes you to snap, because everything else was already too much. It is the final straw that seems minuscule to everyone around you, that seems like something far too small to warrant the emotional explosion it releases, but that's because it is simply the trigger that sets off what has been building up. People of all genders do this, but it's especially common in men because they often haven't been taught the skills they need to have handled the stresses and the emotions that came with them that were building up beforehand. This is, by the way, not an excuse. I'm not saying men aren't responsible for their outbursts or that they shouldn't be held accountable for their actions and words. They are, and they should be. But it's important to understand why they are like this and why it needs to be addressed. Something I really like about South of Midnight is that it doesn't just condemn Laurent for his issues. Something I've noticed in a lot of media is that if toxic masculinity is brought up as a theme at all, which is very rare, it's normally portrayed as a dichotomy. You'll have the character whose masculinity is toxic and therefore they are evil, and the character whose masculinity is positive and therefore they are good, and that's about as far as it goes, even in the discourse surrounding it. South of Midnight, however, actually explores where it stems from and what causes it. Laurent is also a victim of toxic masculinity. He has had his stability and future relationships sabotaged by the things his daddy taught him. He's a tragic figure, just like a lot of men who are raised under this ideology are. In most non-academic conversations about toxic masculinity, the focus tends to be on how much it hurts women, which isn't an unfair thing to focus on. The absolutely unhinged entitlement that often edges into barely veiled hatred of women that the most toxically masculine guys display is well documented, and you'll never hear me claim it shouldn't be addressed. But something worth noting is that it doesn't make men happy either. Look at guys like Andrew Tate or Roosh V or any number of losers with their same noxious personality type. Did they seem genuinely happy to you? No, of course not. They're fucking miserable, and they've decided to make everyone else as miserable as they are because then they can profit off that misery. But they're also the most extreme examples, and most guys who struggle with toxic masculinity aren't anywhere near the level of these twats. They're just miserable and think the fault lies elsewhere, which is why they take it out on other people, which is also a huge problem, obviously. So if toxic masculinity makes men miserable, and doesn't make women happy, and sure as shit doesn't appeal to the non-binary people of the world, why the hell is it so prevalent? Where does it even come from? Well, the answer to both of those things is a little something called gender essentialism.
My pa and my uncle got to a scream about the proper way to raise a boy still a growing.
I'm going to try to keep this brief because this is a topic I want to give its own video, but this is essentially what toxic masculinity was born from. For those who don't know, I am non-binary, which means I've spent a lot of time thinking about gender and the trappings thereof. And the conclusion that I and a great number of philosophers and psychologists and other trans people have come to is that most of what people think of as intrinsically masculine or feminine or even gendered at all is just arbitrary and dumb. And the dumbest and most arbitrary thing of them all is gender essentialism. Explained simply, gender essentialism is the largely discredited belief that, due to their biological differences, men and women are inherently incredibly different and must therefore function a certain way. If you've ever seen those gender coaching TikToks where someone talks about maximizing your feminine energy or something like that, then I am sorry to inform you that you have had the misfortune of being directly acquainted with this ideology. This is the wellspring of bullshit from which basically all gender stereotypes pour out of, and it's where the societally appropriate gender roles and restrictions are sourced. Belief in gender essentialism is the root cause for toxic masculinity. It's where the belief that people should be limited to gender roles comes from. It's where ideas such as women are emotional and men aren't come from, and it continually reinforces social inequalities regarding gender. It's also where a lot of transphobic and homophobic attitudes come from, which I'll save going into for the dedicated gender essentialism video because I've got a Silksong review to write and I cannot spend all month working on this one. The problem, one of the many fucking problems with gender essentialism, is that it asks you to largely define masculinity not through the presence of masculine traits, but through the absence of feminine ones. And this is a problem because, as I established earlier, the traits considered to be feminine are inherent to all people. But if you are expected to reject the parts of you that are considered feminine, then that means rejecting a part of what makes you human. You are being asked to mutilate yourself, to tear out a chunk of your humanity for the sake of an idea of what you should be that will never actually be possible. The reason gender essentialism is so common and so accepted is that it is a societally indoctrinated concept. I know indoctrination is one of those words that anti-woke shitheads like to throw around with no regard for its actual meaning because it sounds scary and they don't think their audience knows what it means, but I'm using the word in its actual dictionary definition. Indoctrination is the process of teaching a person or group to accept a set of beliefs uncritically. Put another way, it is the act of teaching people to accept that a belief is simply true and does not need to be questioned at all. And the idea that men and women are, due to biology, inherently completely different is something that has been indoctrinated into people because that's the only way to make people accept it on a wide enough scale. It has to be continually reinforced because it is untrue and will not naturally propagate otherwise. I'm going to tell you something that's probably going to piss a lot of people off, but it's something people need to hear. Outside of biology and a slight variance in cognitive setup, men and women are not inherently very different. And this statement drives people fucking insane because all kinds of people cling to binaries for dear life. And also because it's much easier to go through life believing entire groups of people are just ontologically bad or angry or dangerous than to accept that all people are made who they are by the life they lived in the way they were raised and are therefore just as complicated a person as you are. There's a lot more appeal in being able to just generalize an entire gender as something than in admitting that the person who hurt you, and by association everyone like them, was not predetermined by biological fate to be an asshole. But the fact is that the vast majority of traits people associate with one gender or the other are taught. It is a matter of nurture over nature. Because people view boys and girls as so different, they expect different things and therefore treat them differently. And this is what leads to boys and girls being raised to be different. Gendered expectations are a self-fulfilling prophecy, and the harder people push these expectations, the more likely men are to develop toxically masculine traits. This is why boys don't cry is such a shitty attitude to have, because it primes men to believe in an extremely restrictive and unhealthy model of masculinity, and deprives them of the lessons of emotional intelligence while also denying them the empathy they need to grow into a well-adjusted individual. It primes all of society to view femininity in men as weakness and therefore a failure. If you've ever wondered why some men are so paranoid about being seen as gay, this is where it starts. Because there is no solid measure of masculinity outside of not feminine, masculinity itself is an extremely ephemeral concept that needs to be constantly proven and reinforced because it can be revoked at any moment. Any dipshit on the internet can post that wearing seatbelts or carrying an umbrella or being fucking born in the spring is gay, and then a bunch of other dipshits will agree, and the men who've been raised with a gender essentialist mindset will feel that they're under attack and need to reinforce their masculinity. And then everyone has to suffer the consequences of Tracy Shitlips saying that wiping your ass makes you a girl. Is this an extreme example? Yes. But does this happen? Also yes. And is it incredibly fucking stupid and built off nothing but people suffering for an ideal of manhood that's forever out of reach and can be revoked at any time? Again, yes. If you want to get rid of toxic masculinity, then you have to look to the source. You will not fix it without first abolishing gender essentialism, because otherwise we'll be right back where we started with a new batch of men and wondering how we got here because you weren't paying attention the first go around.
It sears my soul, sets my veins aflame. Never hold, just myself to blame.
I'd like to draw your attention back to that first interaction between Hazel and Laurent, because I think it actually does a really good job of characterizing him. As I said way at the beginning of the video, Laurent is clearly trying and failing to control his temper here. But do you know what else he does? He tries to keep Hazel from getting hurt.
Hazel,
You didn't deserve her.
that's enough. I need you to leave.
Did you even care? What was so wrong with Mama? With us?
Nothing. Nothing. It's me. It's always me.
Laurent?
Hazel, no! I'm not safe.
The thing about Laurent is that he does care about people. He doesn't transform and lash out because he wants to hurt someone. He does it because he simply was not taught how to handle the grief and pain he bottled up inside him, and it comes out as anger. He just does not have the tools to properly deal with his trauma and his emotions, and he wishes he did. He wants to change, but he doesn't know how or even think he can. At the start of the level, you find a memory from Hazel's mother, and this is what she has to say about him.
When he felt safe, he had so much love to give. Wish he had felt safe more often. Sometimes he seemed like he was scared of himself.
And here's the thing, Lacey is right. Laurent is afraid of himself. He's afraid he might hurt them, and so he ends their relationship. And I think it's important to hear what he has to say when Hazel finally gets him back to normal.
I'm sorry. About what happened to you with your mom and dad.
When my mama died, it broke me. But when that man came and took my daddy from me, I don't even remember it fully. Came to, covered in blood, haunted by what I had done.
I can't imagine going through all this alone.
Maybe it's just pain festers in me. I try to keep it pushed down. I don't want to hurt nobody, especially you and Lace.
I mean, I remember her laughing a lot when you were around. She was happy then. I could tell.
She saw me too clear. I felt laid bare. Scared me.
Scared you.
Spent ages hiding this shame and hurt inside. then Lacey saw me. Flaws and all. She still cared. Felt like juggling broken glass. I was just so scared I was gonna mess things up. I just pushed her away.
I think that hurt her more.
I know. I know.
The sad truth about men who struggle with this is that they simply are not used to being shown empathy. The first step in personally overcoming toxic masculinity is in allowing yourself to be vulnerable, in admitting that there's a problem with how you go about handling your emotions and learning to deal with them. And it's a very hard step to take because it is antithetical to what they've been taught their whole lives. And no, this is not me saying that women are in any way required to put in the emotional labor of cracking through that shell for men. That's something they need to decide to do themselves and to seek professional help for. But it's important to understand that all of this starts at a very young age, when a boy is told not to cry, and then is perpetuated when men are treated as if their pain matters less than the role they've been assigned, and that expecting empathy or help at all is a personal failure. Boys should not be told it's wrong to have feelings. They should not be told that they should just suck it up and deal with the hurt. And they should not be treated like machines whose worth is entirely dependent on their ability to provide. Men should not have to hurt just because they're men. They should not need a reason to cry. They should not have to suffer because it's what's expected of them. And they should not be taught that anger is the only acceptable outlet for their sorrow and pain. And if you're a guy who's thinking, well, I went through this and didn't get help and I turned out fine, or my dad went through that without needing help, all I can say to you is this: you shouldn't have had to hurt either, and I'm sorry that you did. To everyone male or assigned male at birth who watches this, I want you to know that I am so genuinely sorry for what you were put through. I'm sorry that you were taught that your pain didn't matter, and I'm sorry you were forced to cut a part of yourself out because you were promised it would make you a real man and that that's what people wanted, only to look up one day and realize that people hated you for it. I'm sorry that you had the idea that being soft or weak or needing help is wrong, beaten into you by people who themselves were so miserable with the way they'd been taught to be, but because they never learned how to reflect on it, they taught the same thing to you without any thought to how much it would hurt you as well. And if you're a trans man, I am so fucking sorry that you've been thrown into a world of loneliness as the stigma attached to the mantle of maleness stabs into you every day, knowing that some people now regard you as a brand new kind of dangerous animal for something you never did and could not have been prepared for. And to the women and femme presenting, I am so genuinely sorry that you've been forced to confront the brunt of male ugliness. I'm sorry that, so many times, the burden of fixing men broken by the system was unfairly placed on your shoulders, and that the emotional labor of being expected to be a prize for the men breaking themselves that would somehow make it all okay is practically inescapable, even when the man you're with isn't like that, even sometimes coming from other women. And I'm so fucking sorry that the perceived failure to live up to that impossible role you never asked for is so often punished by hatred and violence from the kind of people who feel so entitled to unmitigated access to you that it borders on cartoonish parody. I've often seen the idea that society has failed men, pushed by both sides, and there is a truth to it. But the failure isn't, as some people seem to think, in women failing to hold to the promise that if men just worked themselves harder and stifled their pain until they became machines of productivity and provision, that they would just magically be gifted a woman to make it all worth it. The failure was in teaching them to try to do that in the first place. The tragic and terrible truth to all of this, guys, is that in teaching you that you had to be this way to be a true man, you were wronged. You were drastically failed by a society that often now seems gleefully content to use you up for commerce and political gain while showering you in scorn and punishment for not being man enough. It was wrong to teach you that you had to cut out and bury your vulnerabilities and feelings to be a man. That you were conditioned to believe that to be a real man is fundamentally incompatible with being a complete human. And I understand the anger that comes from that pain, I truly do. But what you need to understand is that nobody else can fix you. No relationship will ever heal the damage done. No romantic partner will ever be able to wave a magic wand and take away all the hurt and anger you're constantly struggling to keep shoved somewhere deep inside. People can give you the tools to help, but that healing has to be a choice you make. And the first step is to recognize that it is a problem. To admit that you've been destroying yourself for your entire life and allow yourself to cry about it. To let yourself be vulnerable and open and stop juggling the broken glass so that someone can take your poor shredded hands in theirs and clean and bandage them and hold you and tell you it's going to be alright. Because you deserve to be allowed to be weak and soft and be given help too. You deserve a life where you do not have to keep trying to shove all of your pain and emotion into the wound left behind when they made you cut out everything they called feminine because they promised it would make you stronger. I wish I could do more for you, but I'm not a therapist. I did minor in psychology for a time, but I am nowhere near close to what you would consider a certified professional. But what I can do for you is give you a simple tool that might help you until you find one and truly begin your healing journey. A lot of people tend to demonize anger. They treat it as a wholly negative thing that good people don't express or experience, but that's simply not true. Anger on its own is an inherently neutral force. As an emotion, anger serves a very simple purpose within the brain, and that is as a response to perceived injustice or unfairness. When you are angry, it is because you perceive something as being so unfair that it warrants a strong emotional response. And the best thing you can do, and this is true for people of any gender, is learn to interrogate that feeling, to stop and take a minute to locate the source of where it is coming from. Is this anger a response to the thing happening right now, or is this just the latest in a long list of stressors that finally became too much? Learning to do this is important because it can help you to truly understand yourself, to understand the origin of why you are at the point you are, and it also helps to prime you for opening up to a therapist. As someone who's gone through a lot of therapy and talked to a lot of psychologists since I was a child, this is something I found to be truly indispensable. And this whole process is going to be scary. From purposefully allowing yourself to be vulnerable, to confronting the dark and ugly pieces of yourself, to dredging up the origin of where the lessons of toxic masculinity came from. It will be scary and hard, and there will be some people who will tell you that you failed as a man because of it. But they can go to hell because it will be worth it. It will be worth it to be able to cry again. It will be worth it to close up that gaping wound and find that you're whole again. It will be worth it to feel like a real person again and not just a cog in a machine, squeezed of everything until you finally just break. Because you're a human. You deserve empathy, you deserve love, and above all else, you deserve to be able to be yourself, all of yourself, with all of your emotions and weaknesses, and that mixture of soft and hard and masculine and feminine that we all have, without the fear that someone will punish you for it. Thanks for watching.